Welcome to our presentation about consciousness. This presentation is brought to you by the students of the Scientific Thinking class instructed by Dr. Walid Fouad at AUC. Since consciousness is an unmaterialistic state, one shall wonder, what is consciousness? Consciousness is an interaction and communication between the body and the brain, emitting energy and controlling actions. The ability of the brain to connect information and acquire them. And although most people tend to think of consciousness as an intangible entity, it is yet controlled by the brain, for it is the location of all our senses. The brain is composed of a frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, cerebellum, a brainstem, and a temporal lobe. Now let's discover together the function of each part of the brain. First of all, the frontal lobe is responsible for behavior, intelligence, memory, and movement, while the temporal lobe is responsible for behavior, hearing, memory, speech, and vision. The brainstem is responsible for breathing, blood pressure, swallowing, heartbeat, and consciousness. The cerebellum, however, is responsible for coordination and balance. The optical lobe is responsible for vision, and finally, the parietal lobe is responsible for intelligence, language, reading, and sensation. Now let's gather our information. The brain is composed of two sides, the left side and the right side. These two sides are connected by fibers that are called the corpus callosum. The two hemispheres are strongly, although not entirely, symmetrical, and the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, while the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. The left side of the brain controls the skills that deal with speech, language, and mathematical calculations, while the right side of the brain controls visuals, auditory skills, and artistic skills. Oops! There is quite a strong similarity between the relationship of the brain and the body and the relationship between the camera lens and the picture. For if a camera lens is damaged, it will only produce flawed pictures, and similarly, if the brain is damaged, it will affect our functions and our sensations. And just like a computer contains programs and makes connections to display information, our brain operates through a series of connections made by nerve cells that connects our brain to the rest of our body. Neurotransmitters pass through the synapse, which is the gap between two nerve cells, and this process repeats itself from one neuron to the other, as the impulse travels to its destination, creating a web of communication. For example, if you touch a hot plate, your brain sends signals to your muscles and you directly remove your hands. This is called a reflex action. And it takes from 6 to 10 seconds for the body parts to react to the signals received from the brain. By looking at the brain activity while making a decision, the researchers could predict what choices would people make before they even themselves were aware of having made a decision. The author of the book, The Great Unknown, was part of an experiment done by John Dylan Haynes, and in this experiment, the author was asked to go sit in a Zen-like state of relaxation and to press the right hand bottom or the left hand bottom whenever he felt the urge to do so. Haynes gave the author a pair of goggles with a tiny screen that will show a random order of letters. He was then asked to record which letter was on the screen Each time he decided to press either the right or the left hand button. The fMRI recorded the brain activity, and Heinz realized that by analyzing the brain activity he could see which button the author would press 6 seconds before he is aware of choosing it. Heinz was able to notice this because a region in the brain lights up 6 seconds before the action is taken. Quoting the author, the experiment suggests that consciousness may be a secondary function of the brain. And similarly, Heinz, we think our decisions are conscious, but these data show that consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg. And moving to the science of sleep, sleep helps the body cells to reactivate and clear waste from the brain, and it supports learning and memory. It even plays a vital role in regulating mood and appetite. What happens in the brain during sleep? The brain produces two different types of sleep: slow wave sleep, which is known as deep sleep, and rapid eye movement. Which cells are involved in provoking slow wave sleep? There are two groups of cells that are responsible in provoking slow wave sleep: the ventrolateral preoptic nucleus and the parafacial zone in the brainstem. When these two cells are switched on, it triggers a loss of consciousness. What is the electrical activity? Brain electrical activity is the electrical activity due to neurons' communication across short and long branches in our brain. The brain waves are divided into 5 stages: beta, alpha, delta, theta, and gamma. Have you ever wondered if you can actually measure consciousness? Are cats and animals generally conscious or not? Experiments on cats. There are experiments conducted to prove whether or not are cats conscious. The cats were given a mirror, and upon looking at their reflection in the mirror, scientists could prove whether or not are cats conscious. Upon a facial change in the reflection in the mirror, cats gave a strong reaction, which proves that cats do have a sense of consciousness. Applying the same experiment on dogs did not flower with much information, for dogs are creatures that rely on the sense of smelling and not visualizing. Therefore, scientists could not prove that dogs are conscious. Apart from Hollywood, no one actually succeeded in communicating with the dead. Buddhists have been exploring their consciousness using meditation techniques for 2 years. But does that really mean that there is life after death? We do not know. Test consciousness after death. In order to test consciousness after death, scientists have to come up with a mechanism that carries people's memories or consciousness into another life. And so far, scientists did not come up with such a mechanism. If consciousness corresponds to the information in the brain, then some argue that the information can theoretically always be reconstructed, and the combination of determinism and reversibility means no information is ever lost. Lost already? Scientists have been able to prove that consciousness is an actual state of the human body by detecting the human brain activity during different times of the day and during different states of the physical activity and interaction. And even though we do not have enough information to confirm what consciousness actually is, we do know that it is some sort of an interaction between the body and the brain, emitting signals and communicating.